Hey, welcome aboard Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. GD850 once again. Appreciate you guys watching our videos. I'm Rich Angelini, the restoration lead for the Kennedy. We have a special guest here, Craig Stalk. I'm going to have him introduce himself, and also we're really excited to be inside the restored IC gun plot. And Craig was actually a very experienced fire control technician. He's going to specify his personal data real quick, and then we're going to ask him some details about the equipment in here. Craig?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Craig Stalk, and I served on board the Kennedy from July of 1969 when I joined her in Gitmo and RefTray, and then I left her in August of 72, just prior for her September deployment. And in that time period, this was my room, the IC gun plot. And Mark I able computer was my main duty. We had several of our FTs who manned and were responsible for the gun director. And so I'll just take you through a little bit of what's going on. The switchboard that you see behind me controlled everything from the gun director up. This part was always the IC guys, always had that part, but from here all the way to the end, all of these switches and knobs controlled Mount 51, Mount 52, the gun director. And we could either turn them on or turn them off. We had various things. If we were using night fire, we'd have a star shell computer, which is part of this system and this system. Very early on, I believe the earlier destroyers had the star shell computer sitting up in the gun director, but I am not quite sure of that. But I know on the Kennedy, we turned around and it was here all the time when I was here. And so therefore, if we wanted to use star shell, we just come up here and say, okay, turn our star shells on. We come up here and flip all the switches, all that's a star shell computer, over to white. That means that they were ready and operational. And then we turn around and we assign, okay, well, now we need Mount 51 to come in on, and we crank all the things from Mount 51, and then we do Mount 52, and then we have the gun director sitting here, and then we have the Mark I able controls here, and that would power everything. And what is very unique is what you're seeing are these switches that control the power to this computer, which also from these wires and everything else ran through the gangway, up through the center passageway, up through the barbette of the gun director. And so it's a central core. And you didn't see anything else. And the amazing thing is that this was all synchro servo systems, so that if something moved to the right, then all of a sudden something had to move to the left. It was always give and take. And a lot of times people would ask, well, how did the ship, when we would go to fire the guns, the ship would have to be, the gun stays stationary and the ship moves underneath the guns. And people would say, oh, how do you do that? Well, that was very simple. Back here, we had what we call the ship stabilizer. And back here, there were 4 little tubes. And these 4 little tubes, right, that were sitting in here, this was called the stable element. And what they did is they fired left and right. So as the ship would move, it was taking information from the ship's gyro compass. It was taking ship from all the other parameters. And when the ship would move to the right or tilt a little bit to starboard, then one of these tubes would light up and the other tube would fall back, and that would send a signal. The other tube would then come back up and it would balance it like a seesaw. So as the ship was moving back and forth like this, the gun mounts would stay there, and you'd actually see the ship moving underneath the gun barrels as they did that. And that was all for land fire support.
Wow. That's pretty amazing thing. And I know land fire, gunfire support was during your era in the Navy during the Vietnam War timeframe. That was a major mission for Gearing class destroyers like Kennedy. Though she didn't make it to Vietnam, she did do that action in Korea. She received 2 battle stars there. But your peers on the destroyers in Vietnam were utilizing this system to fire on land targets.
Correct.
So Craig, one of the interesting things that some of our guests ask is, can you fire the guns, the 5-inch mounts, remotely in this room?
Yes, we can. And what we have on this side right here, by the stabilizer element, we have these little triggers, okay? And what would happen is that when you got ready to fire, you would click, and I don't remember which one is the firing, which one is the signaling one. But what would happen is that you would click it 3 times, and it would go beep, 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 and that would tell the guys in the gun mounts, hold your ears, stand back, everything, and then we'd pull, and we'd actually, with sound power phones, we'd be marking down, and we'd say fire, and we could fire from down here.
Now, if you don't mind, another quick question. As an FT, the sound-powered phone gun circuit was mastered through this room, right? You folks had constant communication with the director in both guns?
Correct.
At all times?
At all times. There was, so what we would do is that we would just turn around and grab a set of these nice little phones, put them on over your ears, and everyone would talk back and forth, and we'd be all in communication with everybody every moment, especially when we were getting ready to undertake fire. And
excellent, excellent. So would control for the firing of the guns come from inside this room?
Actually, the command would come from the weapons officer, I believe, and from the captain. So once the weapons officer had turned around and knew everything that was coordinated with Combat Information Center, we'd get the order to fire. And what would happen is the weapons officer would sort of be standing where you are if we were at general quarters.
He would be in this room with you?
The weapons officer would be in this room with us, and then a second weapons officer would be, or a junior weapons officer would be up in the gun director and monitoring this thing. So we had 2 things, but the weapons officer would be here. He would be relaying commands to me. He would be giving me the coordinates and everything else that I would, if we were doing land targets, we could use this part of the Mark 1 able computer, and we would literally crank in our target line. We'd crank in the ship speed. We'd just crank it in, and old dial numbers, old just hand crank, good old Vita root systems and cranks and things like that. And then here's where the ships would, the gyro compass from the ship and everything else would help coordinate here. So we have the actual ship's heading. And then we could turn around and we change this, and we move some other stuff. And then if we wanted to change the gun elevation and follow other stuff, this is the pointer station. So if we needed to move the gun barrels up 5 degrees or 10 degrees or whatever to come to a spot, our pointer position, he would sit here and he'd look, okay, here's what we would do. They'd crank this in. Same thing with the trainer. Trainer would be on the other side. We take and we shift the actual position of the ship. And then down here, we would turn around and adjust, because everything is always difference on yardage and everything else. We could crank in the range that would fire the guns, the height and feet of the object that we're trying to hit. So if we're out 8,000 yards or 5,000 yards and we need to be up 350 feet, we would crank that all in here manually in order to control the speed of the projectile. It had to leave at a certain in feet per second, and that was adjusted here. So we would just turn around and say, okay, they would tell us the powder temperature and everything else and actually give us the initial, and I can't think of the name of it, unfortunately. That's what happens over time. And, but what would happen is we adjust the actual rate of speed, or what's it called? I'm drawing a blank on its name.
The velocity?
Well, it's the feet per second. So how many feet per second would we be, with this powder charge, would we be getting? So I think it was 2,500 feet per second or 2,300 feet per second. But you're taxing my memory way back.
Oh, no worries.
And it may, if I just get down here and look for a second. Oh, the initial velocity. Thank you, because it says initial velocity.
Yeah.
This is for all of those people who wonder how you can remember stuff. It's labeled very, very clearly. So in a time of stress, you could get there. So the initial gun velocity would tell the computer and help adjust the calculating all of the things that are in here that would then allow the gun elevation to be correct and everything else.
So Craig, you had mentioned some interesting things. You had talked about the trainer and the pointer positions where you could set those here for the guns. Mm-hmm. With this automatic, this would send a signal into the gun mounts. Would somebody have to respond to that signal and change it in the mount, or did this director, excuse me, would this gun computer automatically change it in the guns?
When we put the gun mounts on full automatic mode, they are on fully automatic, and
They belong to you, then?
They belong to me, and they belong to the ride.
I got
The
it.
pointer and the trainer would always be looking through their scopes, just being sure as a backup. But they were hands off when we were in full automatic mode.
So you can fully control Mount 5.1 and Mount 5.2 from in this room, including the firing and the training and the pointing in the correct direction.
Correct.
It's an amazing system developed during World War II and used throughout the Vietnam War.
Correct. Yep. And when we talk about, and then we talk about the aircraft, we have also a way of tracking the aircraft in rate of climb and everything else, so we can turn around and look at our target speed. And this information came down from the radar, which was up in the gun director, in the Mark 37 gun director. And the signal went into the Mark 25 radar console. That signal then was relayed down here, and we could track it. And so we would know what that elevation was, and we would sync by just flipping this little knob. We would now be syncing the computer to the radar, Mark 25 radar dish that was sitting on top of the gun director.
Wow. In your experience on this ship, if you might remember, how did this ship do at tracking aircraft? The gun computers were really starting to, they were really struggling to keep up with the jets, right?
If slow aircraft was very, very easy to pick up.
Okay.
Once the aircraft started to pick up speed, it became more and more difficult. For the slewing speed, remember, this is an old synchro servo system that's moving gears in balls and ball bearings and in all sorts of mechanical cams that are located in here. And so they have a finite speed that they can move. And therefore, because it's all mechanical and it's not digital, you had a perfectly smooth signal. The signal was always, always in time. There was not a little digital bump or anything else, because if you stop to think about the weight of a gun mount and the weight of the ammunition sitting in there, and you send a little digital signal up there that's pulsing at 125 milliseconds, 140 milliseconds, that little gun at the end of the way is going to so, and it's going to. But the analog system that was built in these was absolutely smooth. Downside is that, yes, when all of a sudden the speed starts to increase, the gun director and the Mark 25 radar could only follow that blip fast enough. And then once that got out of that range, then they would drop it and they'd have to reacquire it.
Oh, wow. Understood. Excellent. Would you mind telling us real quick, when you were in here, how many FTs were working with you in this room? And how many IC-men were in here at the same time?
If I recall, the head IC-man was always here because he was responsible for anything that went down. So he was on his own IC circuit with his people looking at everything going on. When we came into this part, we had myself, and I'd be on this part of the computer, and then I would control, probably, if I remember correctly, I would have this side. Then I had a seaman, or not a seaman, but an FTG3 that would turn around, and he would have the computer from this side. He'd control the elevation. He'd control all the other things that would apply to controlling the elevation and the range of fire on this side of the computer. So if we're using star shells at night, he would be dialing in all of that. That was his responsibility. Then we'd have another FT, and it could have been a seaman striker in the FT division that would be standing down at the stabilizer, and he'd be the one that would be sitting there with the getting ready, if need be, to hand fire from the gun stabilizer,
Right.
and stuff. And if I'm looking at it correctly, I believe the handle to the outside most on the right side as we're facing it was the indicator for the buzzer, and they would give them those 3 beeps, and then Mount 51 was in the middle and Mount 52 was on the aft. But I could be a little bit off on that. I'm not quite sure how that goes. And then the weapons officer or his designee would be standing right here and he would be the one directing everybody. He'd be telling us what to do. He'd be authorizing us to give fire notice to the guns. We would then say, lock and, and are you ready? And then they would turn around and they'd load up their hoists. And
excellent. This is a really important space on the ship.
if you were doing gunfire control, it was the whole control area of the ship.
So if you were mentioning something to me earlier, when we were having just shooting the info on the fantail, as we do sometimes, you and I, but you had mentioned if the Mark 1 Able goes down, the gun system goes down.
Automatic control, the gun system for aircraft and for land acquiring targets is totally gone.
Right, so now you go manual. And that's...
So you have to go manual. Doesn't mean that it can't be done. And that's why you have the rangefinder and you have the officer up in the 37 gun director, and you have that pointer and trainer. In each of the gun mounts, you have the gun captain who's got his way of looking at things, and you've got his pointer and trainer, and they can, manually get to you on a land target. I would think it would almost be virtually impossible to track an air target manually with this system.
Understood. How, in your personal experience on this ship, how reliable was this gun computer and the fire control system on this ship for the guns? Was it up most of the time?
With the exception of one major malfunction that we had, since I was on board, it's 100% reliable.
Excellent.
If you had a tube, the weakness of all the systems that were in here goes back to that stabilization unit with those 4 Thyrotron tubes. If they took you out of synchronization with something, then there's no way you could stabilize the guns. So you were really relying on 4 gas-powered tubes to really hold everything together, and they were totally, totally reliable. Very rarely did you have one. You could tell if one was getting weak because all of a sudden the ship wouldn't quite respond. The gun mounts wouldn't respond the same way, and you immediately just changed the tube out. Yeah, back then we had tubes.
Excellent. We still have them.
We still have
on
them.
here, yeah. So, Craig, I appreciate you coming aboard this weekend, which is our field day weekend. I appreciate you supporting the Kennedy as you have been. You and your wife come and visit us and share artifacts. You just recently gave us a donation of your uniforms and other pieces, including the Shore Patrol baton, which I'm going to whack our volunteers if they don't work faster later on in the afternoon. But you're our special guest today. We really appreciate having you as a fire control technician come back into the IC plot room and explain to us how this compartment operated and your experiences on Kennedy and as a Gearing class destroyer sailor. But one question to you on a personal basis is, as a Kennedy crew member and somebody who served in this space, how cool is it to be able to walk back in here again after 50 years?
I come from that generation that really, really enjoyed the Old Navy. And to see this destroyer acting as a museum and part of the whole fleet of destroyers as part of this ship really makes me proud. The hat that I have on is one of about 4 that I wear. And I was proud to have served on the Kennedy. She did me proud for 6 years, being in the Navy, of which the last 3 were stationed here. I left as an FTG1. And it's nice to be able to come back and talk about it and to look at this and to reminisce. I think it's really important that this history be kept up. We lose too much over time, and the efforts that are being made right now in Battleship Cove and through Rich and everybody else, to me, makes me proud to have served. It still makes me proud to have served in the Navy.
Well, thank you. Welcome back, FTG1 Stalk. We would love to have you aboard. And folks, thanks for joining us for this video. We're going to do another video with FTG1 Stalk as well in the Mark 37 Gun Director. That's on Restored, just as a preparation for that. But as you know, but it is on our restoration list. But we appreciate your experiences and your tales. So thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, donate if you can. That's how we preserve these ships. Thank you.